Wade Lightheart, welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to have you. I'm about to make you blush. I know we've already spoke, but I didn't mention that when I first moved to Canada, I came across your and Matt's original podcast with Dave Asprey. So that was a
Oh,
long
wow.
time ago.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I was just sucked into the world of enzymes and everything you guys do. So I've watched your little video clips on YouTube. I really like the one on fulvic acid. So this is not just a sporadic interview. I've been a huge fan of BiOptimizers and your work for like 10 years, as long as I can remember. And I remember you guys discussing the Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity book. And that spurred me to get it. And then that spurred me more into the world of enzymes. So yeah, huge fan here. And now
Oh, well,
I'm
thank you for that. That's great. So I really appreciate the kudos, and I'm glad that some of that messaging got out there.
It did. It makes such a difference. So I'm delighted to have you on. And I want to, for people that don't know you the way um, I don't know you, but from what I know of you,
Right.
um, let's just do a little bit of an intro because you're quite impressive. One, you're Canadian, so a lot of my followers and listeners are Canadian, a lot in the States as well, but you're a three-time Canadian natural bodybuilding champion. So people really need to take heart, pun intended, to what you say today on this conversation in regards to enzymes, because I do want to kind of touch on the whole muscle building recovery aspect of this. You're also co-founder of BiOptimizers, and you majored in sports science, and you've authored several books, and like you're quite a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, well, I'm sure my wife would tell you maybe different story, but
Well, yeah.
so thank you for that. But yeah, bodybuilders were I call the original biohackers.
Mhm.
And the reason are they're, in the bodybuilding world, you have to overcome two elements that we're not genetically made for, and that is to build excess muscle over and above what you need, and to lower body fat levels to suboptimal health levels. But that's the game. I want to build an excess amount of muscle, which is there's genetic limitations on that, and then I want to build super low body fat levels. And so there's stop gaps in that because those are evolutionary advantages for survivability, and you're looking to maximize performance. So, like F1 Formula cars, I'm not interested in driving around a track at 200 miles an hour and a little juice can. But the technology that's developed out of people who want to go to that extreme to maximize car performance is very much like the what we were able to learn in the bodybuilding environment that have generally applicable applications to someone who wants better health. And so many of those principles you can step down and apply in that field. And so, I came into our company's called Biological Optimization. Bodybuilding would be biological maximization. And when you're coming to health and longevity, you really want to optimize. And so we've been always on a quest to what will, we have the RDA regulations on, what we're supposed to get. Then we have these different dietary philosophies, which I think are valuable based on genetic individually and lifestyle parameters. Then we have our hormonal environment, which is oftentimes manipulated in the bodybuilding diet to an extreme, whether it's through dietary regulation or hormonal augmentation. And then you've got how do we take all of those elements and leverage those tools, which the extremists learn, and apply them to the everyday person to identify and overcome whatever limitations they might be experiencing at that time. Because generally, a bodybuilder had to figure that out a
Yeah.
long time ago before, particularly, blood sugar regulation, the ability to maintain muscle mass, the ability to retain a healthy body weight or maintain your body fat levels. All of that stuff originates out of old bodybuilding science.
Yeah.
So yeah, we came to the field kind of natural evolutionary aspects. I don't care how much muscle I carry nowadays. I'm not trying to get big as a house as maybe I was when I was in my 20s and 30s. But nowadays, I'm glad I did because that muscle mass from a bone density, blood sugar regulation, and I've just adopted more to an older person. right?
Yeah.
So
So what you're saying is you basically don't have that ego anymore. It's kind of gone by the wayside that we see bodybuilders chasing the pump and their one rep max.
yeah, it's the thing with the for people who have been in the sport, certainly externally, it seems narcissistic in nature, and I can see how people could do that. But the the process is very monk-like. It's a very monk-like existence. The discipline required in that sport is about as extreme as any sport there is. And because you're trying to overcome these genetic limitations. And so that discipline, when reconfigured into, say, business, bodybuilding, personal health goals, personal goals, you can apply that disciplinary aspect into any field and generally build success because success is built by consistency over time.
Mhm.
You can do something for a little bit, but is it sustainable?
Yeah.
And I would say that much of the one caveat on a lot of the bodybuilding maximization is it's not sustainable over a long period of time. So, and that's true of all sports. Sports careers generally peak between 26 to 32 with the mean being around 28, 29. That's about your peak athletic capability. And then you've got to develop the other areas of your game to just maintain prevalence because you're basically out of the game in professional sports. Like you're old and outdated relatively soon. The good news about that is you become clear about the natural decline of aging much sooner than the general population is cognizant of. And I think that's an advantage because you start to recognize, oh, heck, I'm not as big and as strong as I used to be. I'm losing muscle mass. I don't have these suboptimal states. I don't want, I have other things in my life that I can't be on my, eating my 6, 7 meals a day and training twice a day and etc. So that monastic lifestyle, if you can shift out of it, can translates into a lot of success in other areas. And fortunately, I was able to make that jump.
Yeah. So I started my journey back in 2006. I started at 280 pounds. So for context, I'm only 5'5". So I'm like really small
Wow.
build. And now I'm 140. So
Wow, that's
um
amazing.
and according to Adaxa, I have high percentage of muscle, put it like that. But
Hmm.
I hit my goal weight. Like I lost 150, 65 pounds in like a year and a half. But
That's
then
incredible.
I was like a skeleton though, because back then, um, I knew about exercise, but not so much about weightlifting. So I transitioned then. I knew I liked health, and that's where I got into personal training. And it's taken me a long, long time to build as much muscle as I have. And you mentioned genetics, and I am genetically blessed. I can look at
Hmm.
weights and food, and I'll put on muscle like so easy,
Yeah.
which is fantastic, which is very interesting to what you said because I'm the leanest and strongest I've ever been right now. And I'm obviously older than I've ever been right now. But part of what I think and what I wanted to speak to you about, and people ask me all the time, do you take steroids? What do you do? What are your tips? What are your secrets? And I always say, honestly, I take a mountain of enzymes. I make sure that I'm keeping my inflammation low and I'm absorbing as much nutrition as possible out of my food and I use enzymes to do that. Like I'll take 20 enzymes at a time. So I was hoping we could speak on that because they're a big part in your journey as well.
Yeah, so I was not blessed to gain muscle very easily. I had terrible genetics but I was fascinated with the sport and I think that made me a better coach than an athlete. So, I've been to the world championships 3 times. I can get to the world championships. I can't win the world championships. I just don't have the genetics. But I have the genetics to get there in that I'm able to use my brain to offset some of these physical limitations. And back after the 2003 Mr. Universe contest, I was following some of the dietary advice. I was doing this as a plant-based guy. No one said that was possible. I thought I'd run the experiment
Mm.
and made some critical errors, disrupted my digestion. And that's when I met a doctor, Dr. Michael O'Brien, another good Irish cat, by the way. Anyways, he was like this. probably the most amazing health practitioner I've ever come across in my field. He was in his 70s and he was so vibrant and so full of health and so element. And he introduced the concept of the importance of digestive health and the role of enzymes and why we didn't get enough of them and how this was the great equalizer to the aging equation. And he talked about down regulation of enzymatic production in the body, particularly starts with proteases.
Yeah.
Proteases in particular usually shut down your production by about 28. Interesting, that correlates usually with the peak amount of muscle mass of an athlete who's recovering from muscle tissue. So if you look at, say, running backs, highly explosive, need to be heavily muscled in order to do it and take an incredible amount of damage in football. And you'll find almost none that are able to maintain peak performance after the age of 28. It's almost invariably they just drop off significantly. They just can't recover from the damage that they're taking because it's not just muscle damage. It is also the damage from getting the impacts that they're facing, running into 350-pound guys over and over again. That's really damaging for the body. And go try it once, and most people have never met a 300 plus pound athlete. And when you run into one of those people and they plant you into the ground, it's a life-changing experience. And these guys are willingly doing this over and over and over, 20, 30 times a game. They're doing this every single week for years, and they just don't go off. But what's interesting is the proteolytic drop off is right there, same as explosiveness in other athletes. In other words, proteases convert the protein that you eat into the amino acids that you require that sustains muscle mass. And in peak performance areas, the range of, so for example, if you look at an Olympic athlete, the difference between first and last place at an Olympic event is a couple of percentage points.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not that much. And it's a world away. Like, I go to the world championships, and when I look at the best athletes, they are a world away from me, even though I might be top 10. Number one and two, they might as well be like one in a thousand. Like they're like, I'm just not going to approach that level. Why is that important? Well, all of us are going to go through the aging and degenerative process. And when you don't make enough proteases, for example, that's the enzyme that breaks down protein, where is your body going to get those amino acids? Well, it's going to consume your muscle mass. And, looking after the average person after in the early 20s starts to lose about 1% of their muscle mass a year. And they're largely catabolizing this in order to supply the amino acids for other functions in the body, neurotransmitter function being one of the biggest ones. We see a rash of people who are suffering from neurotransmitter deficiency that is being treated through pharmaceuticals, which further accelerates the problem, etc. It treats the symptoms, but not the underlying cause. And he introduced us to that concept, and I started applying it. And it took me about 4 years to figure out. First, I did it for my health, and then I started figuring it out in an athletic environment. And super physiological dosages of enzymes, particularly in a training environment with a high protein-based diet. It was a massive game changer. And so 4 years later, I went to the World Championships only eating 85 grams of protein a day at 175 pounds of my contest weight.
So half
So
of what you should have been consuming.
half of what was recommended, well, actually, probably most of my guys at that level were probably eating 200 to 250 grams at that weight
Yeah.
in a bodybuilding environment for satiety reasons. And so I was able to break that mold. And I was bigger and stronger 4 years later, 4 years older, and I wasn't using any anabolics. So I wasn't skewing the data with hormonal optimization because anabolics, for example, increase protein synthesis, particularly at the muscle tissue. And that's why athletes will use them, or that's why people will augment with things like testosterone treatment as their hormonal starts to dip, because as your hormones drop off, your ability to maintain muscle mass. And so we wanted to nip that in the bud without the hormone augmentation, first with enzymes to sustain my ability to get amino acids to the muscle over a longer period of time. And so far, I haven't had to go on TRT or anything like that. Certainly not against it, but I'm in my 50s and I want to kick that can down the road. I want to have some more children. I just had a son not that long ago and want to have another child. So I want to kick that can down because it can be disruptive for getting someone pregnant. So we'll kick that can down the road. I do think that there's a benefit to it, and it's something people need to consider. But even then, they can get the lifestyle stuff worked out first, and using digestive enzymes prior to our meal. What it does, it preserves is our own enzymatic production. So if you have say 100 units of enzymatic production in the body, and enzymes are involved in everything from thinking to blinking. Okay. And as that capacity gets lowered, or the amount, this was the thing I noticed in the bodybuilding world, they're eating five, six, 7 times a day in order to sustain the muscle mass that they're growing in the training protocol. So what happens, they often would age quicker. And the reason being they would age quicker is because they're using so much of their enzymatic capacity to just digest the food. And a lot of bodybuilders were ending their careers because of digestive issues, and I saw that element. And so we started to switch that, and we were the first kind of bodybuilding oriented company that came out of that. We started out in that market. And then as I started applying it to the holistic health clinic I worked in Vancouver for a number of years, I started saying, oh, actually, if you can use enzymes and stuff, you can actually offset a lot of conditions that people were having. And that became a fascinating journey, and we've probably got the most complete uh, suite of high potency enzymatic offerings in the market for every diet. We got plant-based enzymes for like vegetarian oriented enzymes. We've got Masszymes, which kind of covers everybody. We've got ketogenic enzymes with Capex. We've got gluten enzymes to break down gluten where people don't have the enzymes in order to break that down. So we really went deep on that suite of products in order to offset the ravages of aging, and it's worked. It's essentially worked. So I'm very happy about that. It's been a long journey. 21 years we've been doing this. So
Yeah. And actually, the gluten enzymes, the PP4, you guys were the first ones I heard that about as well. And I was saying that to a girl doing my nails yesterday, and she's like, "Oh, there should be something that helps you break down gluten." And I was like, "There is." But you look great, and I think the enzymes have a lot to do with that. And it's so interesting all the detail you went into there because I've been taking serapeptase
yep, awesome
for
enzyme.
yeah, so I've been taking that probably 6 or 7 years every morning as soon as I get up. Empty stomach between 240,000 and 360,000 every morning. Because I caught on early, apart from the enzymes, that keeping inflammation low was a big factor in aging. And I
Yep.
think I like to think I'm aging pretty well. I definitely think I look younger than I am. And then I flip-flop between Masszymes and super enzymes, which is from the Now Foods brand. So I flip-flop
Yep.
between them during the day because the Now Food ones, they're uncoated, they're a tablet as well. So even though they taste like cat pee, they seem to work pretty well. But as well, what you're saying with the bodybuilders, I generally as well only have 3 meals a day because that was something else I caught on to. Like, you're eating too much, you're going to put too much of a strain on your body. Plus, I'm small, and the amount of weight I lift for being so small, I just was kind of trying to piece everything together to slow down that aging process. It seems to have worked well, but I don't think the general, like, we're speaking about bodybuilding and athletes and people who are more prevalent in the health world. I don't think the general population is as aware of the benefits of enzymes as they should be, especially for the growing numbers of people with gastric issues now.
12% of the emergency hospital visits in the United States are gastroenterological issues. And you think about that, 12% of the emergency hospital visits, about 25% are heart-related cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
Someone takes a heart attack or a stroke or something like that. So almost about half of those are now, and it keeps rising. And a lot of it has to do with all the chemicals in the food, all the preservatives. The other element for people to say, well, why should I take, exogenous enzymes into my diet? And I'll answer that question. The reality is we're the only species that cooks, process, irradiates, and pasteurizes our food. In other words, and all that does is destroys the enzymes, which are essential to breaking that food down. So the reason why they do that, they irradiate the apples in the grocery store or the fruit in the grocery store, so it can preserve shelf life, right? If you left that at home, it'll go bad really quick. Anybody that's had an apple tree in their yard or, any kind of fruit, they know you got to, it's ripe, it's pick it, you got to eat it, and that's it. Or otherwise, it's going to go bad in a couple of weeks. That's where the whole process of preservation came in with preserves and bottling your food and saving it for the wintertime in northern climates. But all of that strips away the enzymatic activity. Fermented foods was a common element within almost all of the longest living populations of the world, which is essentially a fermentation process, an external digestive process that provided extra enzymes and probiotics. Animals eat their food in a raw, enzymatically rich state, whether they're herbivores, omnivores, or carnivores. We don't. And so that our pancreas, for example, to body weight size, is 3.5 times larger than any other organism per species, which is just largely related to the release of amylytic carbohydrate metabolizing enzymes. And so all of that just takes away from your enzymatic capacity in the body. And that's the workers. That's the street sweepers, the mail people, the guys in the delivery trucks, the people fixing the power lines, all of that stuff in society. If you don't have those, society breaks down. Enzymes are the workers. The only things that does work in the body is probiotics and enzymes. Enzymes involved in over 25,000 different processes in the body, and they go through families, and particularly on the amino acids because we're recycling protein excessively in the body, which is determinant of enzymes of converting it from one amino acid into another and reconstituting it. Well, enzymes do that. So by supplementing with a product like Masszymes, which is the most potent proteolytic enzymatic formulation on the market, this provides you a whole range to help that recycling element of the amino acids. It reduces the drain on your liver production of these enzymes, and that frees them up to do other things like run your brain or run your heart or run your liver or run your kidneys or those elements. And so in Dr. Howell's book, he talked about this enzymatic capacity, or this enzymatic pool that you are eventually draining. And his research was pretty convincing about the longevity aspects of all the animals they would put on enzymes. Also impact uh, the advent of genetic diseases and an enzymatic deficiency. That's the famous cat syndrome, Pottinger's cats, which was repeated by Dr. Howell many times. They fed animals enzymatically deficient diets. Well, by third generation, they had weird sociological behavior, an exponential rise in genetic conditions, and the inability to procreate. Well, we've really entered that phase after World War II when we went to conventional farming, monoculture. People moved to the city. The manufacture of highly condensed food products that are been cooked and processed and eliminated, and then we put those in, and they provide lots of calories but no enzymes. And so our body's working extra hard, and then we develop diabetes, or we get hardening of the arteries, or you get cholesterol buildup in the body, or calcification in the tissues, or cognitive declination because we don't have the enzymes to make our neurotransmitters. And you can offset a lot of that by just supplementing with enzymes. And when you talked about superdosing, so I went down that route too. Well, what happens when you superdose? So the whole benefit of fasting protocols was largely because it frees up your enzymatic capacity that's adjusted to digestion and allows you to heal these other elements of your body. And that's really the mechanism. And so you can accelerate healing on a fasting cycle with the use of enzymes. You can optimize your diet with the use of enzymes to get the elements that you need and reduce the load on your liver. And I do believe that it's one of the really unrealized anti-aging kind of methodologies that build up over time. And I've been on enzymes every day for the last 21 years, and I'll be on it for the next however long I'm here.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Howell's book really does show that enzymes help to mitigate and offset those diseases that happen with aging. back to enzymes being a very viable anti-aging tool. So two things here. Generally, when I'm describing enzymes to my clients, the easiest way is to say enzymes help your body stay clean. They clean up the damaged
Yes.
proteins, the scar tissues, just help everything be nice and clean and shiny and flow better. You may or may not appreciate this analogy, but you might if you were around in the 80s, which you were, is I like to describe enzymes as like little Pac-Men, like hundreds of little Pac-Men going through your system,
Yep.
just eating up everything. That helps people kind of visualize what's going on when they take enzymes. Another thing though, and I would love your opinion on this because I almost laughed. I was sent, I don't know if it was clickbait or not, but I was sent a link from someone off Facebook the other day, and it was this so-called metabolic health professional discussing how you should never ever take enzymes ever because you know what enzymes do? They eat you up and they will eat up your gastrointestinal lining and they will eat up all the enteric linings. And pretty much she was saying that enzymes are going to eat you from the inside out and you're going to just fall to mush on the ground. And I was like, where do people even come up with this stuff?
Yeah, there's a thing. The problem with the social media element, and it's got a pros and cons. One, it gave rise to voices who would have been squashed under the centralized control of communication, which we lived under. We didn't know. Now we're much more aware of.
Mm,
But the other element is it does provide a platform for, say, unqualified or low resolution thinking and popularity um, of someone's messaging. And usually, the more outrageous and inflammatory that you can make statements, the more traction you'll get. And I always say that every influencer has about maybe 1,000 tricks. And so that's 1,000 pieces of content. And then what typically happens, because they're spending so much time on creating content, they're not spending enough time on researching content.
reading. Yeah.
And the resolution of the truth, which started out really well and really great early on, starts to thin out with the demands of being now a public figure and feeding the beast of the information. And so having that balance between research development and staying in tune with things and not falling prey to clickbaity statements. And so right now, the current way to get popular is to pick whatever people are the biggest influencers and then launch some sort of attack on them, either attacking their character or their philosophy or some nuance within it with something like enzymes are going to kill you. You know, coffee is the food of the devil. Uh, Vegan diets are terrible for emotional health. You know, whatever it happens to be. And
Collagen
so,
doesn't work, or yeah.
correct, exactly. So you got to create an inflammatory statement against whatever is the trend in order to create a counter trend or to get into some sort of war online that people are fascinated by.
Mm.
And if there was ever someone who mastered that was another an Irish compatriot of yours would be Conor McGregor. So Conor McGregor, who was gifted with communication, would viciously attack his opponent in a way that got people going, "Oh my God, this is great!"
Well, it was exciting
It
too.
was exciting, and then the people. There's two elements. There's the people that love Connor, and then the people that hated Connor. So the people that hated Connor wanted to see whoever he was attacking beating them up, and the people who loved Connor wanted to see him beat up the person, and that became fascinating. Well, he actually played that as well as anybody in the modern history, largely because of his skill set. Very good on the mic, very good at saying things that's a little off key and inflammatory, and doing it in a way that was really cheeky and kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like what I would like to say if I was a totally capable person that could just beat up anybody. I can say all these things outside of the social graces. So there's a subconscious attraction to that. We have the same thing happening in the media where people are subconsciously attracted to the controversial statement or the inflammatory statement or the fear-based statement that may somehow get your attention. So we don't live in the information world, we live in the attention world. How can I get attention? And typically, the more attention you get is by the more inflammatory, low resolution you think. It's one thing to be calling people out into a fight, to get more
We
eyeballs
don't
and
do
sell
that
more
anymore.
pay-per-views.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see in the car park, it's all behind the
yeah.
computer screen now.
Correct. So you don't have to deal with the consequences. And I think that's detrimental to behavior. And, no disrespect to the person that would say that, but what typically happens is they'll avoid any space where a reasonable debate is happening. And the reasonable debate isn't about actually debating towards, hey, how do we get to the truth? It's more about debating about who's right and who's wrong. We wrote a book called The Ultimate Nutrition Bible. You can see that in the background here. Matt, my business partner, is a ketogenic guy. I haven't eaten a piece of meat in 24 years
You're missing
on
out.
a plant-based side. When we founded a company together, so we wrote a book that outlined the various strengths and advantages of every diet.
Mhm.
I've learned things from the ketogenic diet world that I've applied to my plant-based diet. Matt has learned things from my plant-based diet that he's applied in his ketogenic world. We're better for it. We learned more things because we recognized after, we probably argued with each other for at least a decade. And now we debate each other, and it's spirited, and it drives us. The debate drives us to look deeper into our own information and to challenge our biases or our awarenesses. And oftentimes, experts can get ossifized on their past credentials,
Mhm.
and they don't stay up to date for the reasons we outlined. And oftentimes, or they fall prey to, hey, let's make something clickbaity,
Mhm.
and say something that everybody's doing. Like magnesium will kill you, or this superfood will cause death, or whatever. And they cite some research, and whether that's valid or not, it's always questionable.
There's always something, yeah. And between yourself and Matt, and in the population as a whole, when we have these conversations and bounce ideas back and forth, it helps us to piece the puzzle together as an individual and understand like our own individual needs by trying here, there, and everywhere. We don't need to be as dogmatic as a lot of people are. And using, as I say, tools. There's loads of tools that we can have at our disposal that we can use. Um, so there was one thing I wanted to add in though, like us Irish, we were gifted with the gift of the gab, which is
Oh, for sure.
Connor has. And I like to joke with like the people in the gym. I'm like, I've just got the Irish charm. Like I just have it. It's a gift. But
Yeah.
with the enzymes, I wanted to ask you, in regards to chronic inflammation, like we spoke about muscle growth and recovery, and enzymes can be very beneficial there. How beneficial can enzymes, whether or not, I mean, I've heard you say before that even taking digestive enzymes on an empty stomach, some of them can convert into proteolytic and clean you up. How beneficial are they for people with chronic inflammation, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis? Do you think they have a place in a treatment protocol for those people?
Any itis is an inflammatory response, which means that whatever, just like athletic damage or oxidative damage protect for that tissue, usually it's genetically related and dietary lifestyle that triggers the epigenetical response, means that whatever damage is being done to your body, your ability to reduce that inflammatory cycle is not up to par. So a lot of people will follow some sort of elimination diet to reduce the inflammatory agents. But in a case of a disease state, often you've activated metabolic forces against you. And just like training, just like disease state, enzymes essentially bolster your resources to combat the inflammatory nature of like living is inflammatory, breathing is inflammatory, like everything
Yeah.
has a certain amount of
Eating is
inflammatory, and you need a
inflammatory.
positive, yeah, you need a positive balance between these two elements. And so you can only, and this was an element for those who don't know, I took the extremist, being a bodybuilder, then I went on the extreme case. Well, let's go to a completely raw food diet. So I did a raw food diet for 2 years to preserve enzymatic capacity. I did extensive fasting. for years. And because I knew of the health benefits of fasting and its ability to take away the zombie cells and the suboptimal cells and get rid of, clean up the system. But with restrictive elements, there is a threshold.
Yeah.
There is a threshold. You can only restrict yourself so much. And then the restriction itself not only becomes both a lifestyle and a social problem, but then becomes a metabolic problem. So you see people who have been on extended calorie deficient diets. A great one would be the post weight gain elements of people on, say, like the Atkins diet that were, eating 500 calories a day and then using shots in order to offset their appetites. You see this at the GLP-1 that are currently raging. Moderate use of a GLP-1, very, very small dosages to improve insulin sensitivity with a sensitive diet and optimized hormones, probably very beneficial if capitalized with a weight training regimen to maintain the muscle mass. When you're in an inflammatory condition, any itis condition, and all disease is a form of oxidative damage that is specifically relevant to a particular organ, then that may have a genetic basis, etc. Enzymes are upstream to all of those healing processes. 25,000 different enzymatic processes. So there's a great study that was performed on karate practitioners. So in karate, when you're in competition, you take all sorts of damage. So when they looked at hematomas, bruises, cuts, all of these abrasions and stuff, they were taking the recovery time from 2 weeks to a couple of days. In other words, so a bruise is a significant damage, or a cut is a significant damage. Well, when they added high dosages of enzymes, all of a sudden the recovery times were cut in fraction. Same thing happens when you're in a disease state. A disease state is a specific label to a specific condition relative to some research in a compartmentalized area. What they're not trained to do is they're trained to treat that condition. What they're not trained to do in the medical field is to optimize your ability to regenerate, recover, and to reduce inflammation.
Yeah.
Enzymes are, I think, the biggest factor in that journey. Not only will they help deliver the agents of your diet, the anti-inflammatory agents of your diet, it gives you much more inflammatory mitigating capacity. And that's been one of the big keys to my own success and my own recovery in my own life, is because of the profuse use of enzymes over a long period of time. And so even at the age of 50, I was able to go back to a competition 50 and maintain my physicality of what I had when I was 35 and no hormonal augmentation. I do believe it's because I spent all those years doing that. So no different in diet. So we look at performance, healthy performance. We look at sports performance. We look at living our best life, or whether that it's insulin management or hormonal optimization or muscle mass or body fat reduction or collagen retention. And we see these as isolated conditions in a compartmentalized world. Same thing with a disease condition. I got, dysfunctional liver or kidneys or brain function or whatever.
Mhm.
We don't look at it, how do I increase my capacity to heal, regenerate, recover, and reduce inflammation? And enzymes are king of the hill on that whole process. And I learned that, and I saw it, and I witnessed it with Dr. O'Brien as this like super, senior citizen that just had the most remarkable physicality and vitality and cognitive capacity. And he was just such a brilliant person. I was like, obviously, I want to be like that when I'm in my 70s and 80s. I'm going down that route, and it changed the course of my life. And we took up the torch, Matt and I, after that, saying we're gonna take this message far and wide, and we have for the last 20 years because of it. And thankfully for him and that influence.
Yeah. So,
And his
yeah.
history, just to comment on that, his history, and I would suggest people go read Bernard Jensen's Come Alive book, who
Mhm.
is one of the great health practitioners in the United States. And Dr. O'Brien was flown in to help him recover from cancer metastasized to the bone. And he used massive dosage of enzymes and massive dosage of a particular proteolytic probiotic, which we offer nowadays. And Jensen wrote in the book, he dedicated the book to him because he said, that brought me back from an 85-pound, 78-year-old man that was with cancer metastasized the bone. 8 weeks and 1 day later, he was completely recovered. These results were also echoed by the Gonzalez protocols. And I served for years on the American Anti-Cancer Institute as an advisor, and I would deal with this in my holistic health clinic in Vancouver. And virtually every single person that I put on mass signs on a disease condition of whatever felt immediate improvements on their energy, their recovery, and the symptoms that they were experiencing. I'm not saying it's a cure. I'm not saying I'm treating anything, but witnessed for the last 20 years over and over and over the same results. People feel better, they do better, they recover better, they heal better. It's not a be all cure all, but it certainly helps stack the cards in your favor.
Yeah, for sure. So, continuing on from that, if someone is in a severe fibromyalgia flare or rheumatoid arthritis flare, or I'll add on to that colon cancer or lung cancer or something, what kind of dosage of enzymes are we looking at? And we're looking at masszymes, serrapeptase, bromelain, like what are we looking at?
Yeah. So my standard operating is 25 mass times a day and in a compromised state with about half of that in proteolytic probiotics because you want to extract any suboptimal recycled amino acids inside of your gut because undigested proteins are a big problem in your immune system response. And all of those immune system response are basically an over responsive immune system to a suboptimal state, and you start spiraling upwards. And so you got to stop the leaky gut. You got to eat up the undigested protein that reduces the bad bacteria, and then you want to smash as many enzymes. Dr. O'Brien found no limit to what you get. I've personally taken 1,000 enzymes a day to see if there was any breaking the GI barrier because you won't absorb it stuff. You get no enzymes in the stool. They're completely absorbed and utilized. I felt amazing. I used it in augmentation of accelerating the benefits of long-term fasting, like 10-day fasts. It amplifies the benefit and effect of it. And in a really, really compromised state, I would go to 500 a day.
That's a
And
lot.
I dealt with that. I've dealt with that, people. There's no negative consequences, but there's an accelerant of the recovery. That's in its dire conditions, obviously, because it's obviously cost prohibitive. I had to start my own company to do those things, because it was
Oh,
just
yeah.
crazy. But hey, I'm an extremist by nature in experimentation. So both Matt and I, and we've done it, and we take an excessive amount, for example, when we go through brain training. And we've been able to produce the best results on neurofeedback programming from a variety of clinics that we've been to. We even developed our own for that because your brain shuts down when you're pushing neurofeedback training. And all disease means that you're slowing down some metabolic process inside of the body because you're compromised. And so you're rerouting resources to recover. And if the disease continues to progress, you're not offsetting your capacity to heal.
Yeah.
Enzymes assist in the healing and regenerative process. So the more of them that you have, you're just sending more workers to the job site. So you can put all the materials down at the right diet and the right lifestyle. If you don't have workers on the site, you come back a couple weeks later, the materials are there. Maybe some robbers stole it. You got to have workers there guarding the gates, and you got to have workers putting the pieces together in your body and regenerating. And when you're in a disease state, you're already ultra compromised. So uh, turning back and adding more workers, which enzymes are, it just makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, so you're cleaning up better and you're speeding up the rate that you're cleaning up. So we're coming up on time, but I wanted to ask you back to the digestion issue. How can enzymes help people with digestion? How does that work? Because we didn't really touch on that.
Yeah, well, there's 5 stages to digestion. The taste, touch, sensory food that gets you in that place. That's why restaurants have, low lighting and nice music and create an environment so you go to the rest and relax phase. The second phase that comes in after you start masticating your food, eating it, chewing it, that sort of stuff. The food goes down the esophagus into the upper cardiac portion of the stomach. So you've got 30 to 60 minutes where the enzymes that are supposed to be present in the food would start working. If you don't have that, your body now has to start manufacturing enzymes out of the liver and then and depositing them in the pancreas and into the digestive tract in order to produce that. That's actually not the natural state of how we're supposed to eat things because we cook our food. We're the only people that do that. So we've disrupted the normal aspect. After 30 to 6 minutes, hydrochloric acid comes into the system, and that changes the pH of the enzymatic formula. Some enzymes will become activated, some enzymes will become deactivated. That's why you want, for example, a multi-stage protease that works in all of the pH ranges so you cleave the amino acids properly. After that, your body releases what's called bicarbonate buffers, which is a fancy name for minerals. That neutralizes the stomach acid so that when it goes into the intestinal tract, your flora, the good and bad bacteria will start to feed on it. Like I said, 10% good, 10% bad, 80% opportunist. By optimizing your gut flora, you have to realize these are the last stage of converting your food into energy and building blocks. So enzymes on the front side, hydrochloric acid in the middle, and good probiotics relative to your diet is the three elements that make digestion work. And then all of that with you have what's called peristaltic contraction, smooth muscle tissue that moves the food through so that you have proper elimination of the waste afterwards. Um, when you augment enzymes, number one, your liver goes, and that's why I suggest take them before you eat or take them on an empty stomach. If they're on an empty stomach, they get absorbed and utilized and converted into other metabolic enzymes inside the body, systemic enzymes, etc. Systemic enzymes only work, like you mentioned, serrapeptase. You have to take that on an empty stomach because it doesn't have digestive benefits. It's only benefit for bringing up scar tissue and adhesions in the tissues. So it's very effective for that. Interesting enough, you can get a similar effect from masszymes on proteolytic enzymes on an enzymatic stomach. You can do that as well. It'll break up proteolytic adhesions inside of the body. So the enzymes now free up your enzymatic capacity at the liver, and that allows them to run all the other things. And any excess enzymes that you take will get reconstituted and leveraged into these metabolic processes. I know this from clinical practice. I would have people that came into my clinic and I would see maybe they had a skin condition like psoriasis or eczema. And I'd say, oh, you're not processing your fats. I'm going to give you a bunch of lipase enzymes, which breaks down fats. And sure enough, 30, 60 days later, guess what? Their skin's better. Same thing, I'd have people that were on a diabetic blood sugar regulation. I'd say, look, take these enzymes before you eat your meals. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, they didn't need as much insulin because they were metabolizing their carbohydrates better. I give them amylase. Then I've seen people suffering because they couldn't put on muscle or they were subjected to, suboptimal neurotransmitters and they were treating medications and stuff. I was like, take these proteolytic enzymes before you have your protein, get your protein diet up and get these enzymes in. And all of a sudden, they come back a couple weeks later. And I'm like, well, how's your depression? How's your anxiety? Well, it doesn't seem to be bothering me the last couple of weeks. I'm like, yeah, because you got the neurotransmitters in your head. The enzymes were converting your proteins into the amino acids that could feed your probiotics, and they could make those little neurotransmitters in your gut, like serotonin, that make you feel good. So all of these things relate back. It's not what you eat, it's what you digest, absorb, and utilize. And enzymes are the kingpin in making sure that you're providing all those broken down elements that make digestion easy and smooth and allow your body to work the way it's supposed to.
I think so. I agree. But you mentioned hydrochloric acid there. Where does hydrochloric acid come into this, especially as it relates to acid reflux? And I suppose we'll start to wrap it up here, but I wanted to squeeze this in.
It's your thing. So what's interesting about acid reflux, if you do not have a significant amount of hydrochloric acid, when that 30 to, so you got 30 to 60 minutes and then the hydrochloric acid comes. A lot of people think there's just a big pool of acid sitting there waiting. No, no, it's released. First stage of hydrochloric acid production is you want to make sure you're properly hydrated because you need water to produce hydrochloric acid in the system. A lot of people are chronically dehydrated. Second thing is
Is that why people will experience a lot of acid reflux after alcohol, regardless if it's red wine or not, is because of the dehydration aspect of alcohol?
that's one of the contributors. The other contributing could have an H. pylori overgrowth, and the sugar from the alcohol will stimulate the growth. So if they have an H. pylori overgrowth, which is one cause of hydrochloric acid or acid reflux. But as a general rule, what happens is particularly as we age, we may not produce enough hydrochloric acid. And what happens if that hydrochloric acid serves two purposes. One, it's a disinfectant. It kills bacteria, viruses, bugs, whatever that comes into the system. It's designed to kill that. The second phase is it changes the pH. So it's a key element in the cleaving of certain key amino acids, particularly. That's why you have to have a sophisticated enzymatic formula because they work interactive because you have a like protease, you have a 3.0 and a 4.5 and a 6.0, which relate to pH
pH.
ranges. Yeah. And so if you don't have sufficient amount of hydrochloric acid, what happens is the food starts to ferment and the esophageal trigger stays open. And what little acid you have starts to splash up on the esophagus or creates that heartburn sensation or that burning in the throat. That's because oftentimes you don't. And there's an easy test for it. You take a half teaspoon of baking salt soda and you put it in 4 ounces of water, a small little 250 milligram glass, stir it up and drink it on an empty stomach. If you burp within 5 minutes, you have enough hydrochloric acid. If you don't have enough. Take an HCl tab uh, when you eat, and you'll fix that. Usually, it's about 12 weeks of using hydrochloric tablets, and you'll find that a lot of times it kind of reconstitutes your HCl system. Some people like to take it, um, continuously. They may have suboptimal genetics on hydrochloric acid, and then you get into your probiotics. So those three things work together. And as we age, hydrochloric acid does tend to diminish. And so oftentimes older people really do well, just even on a hydrochloric acid tablet. We have an HCl breakthrough tablet capsule contains a few enzymes and probably bang for the buck. A lot of people will get more out of that than anything they can do, and it's very inexpensive. You take one cap and you're good. And all people go, wow, how come I taking hydrochloric acid and my acid reflux and my heartburn goes away? Well, now you have enough sufficiency. You don't get the fermentation. The sphincter stays closed, the esophageal sphincter, and then the food digests properly. It'll also help beat down any H. pylori elements. And I do believe that's why people who have extensive H. pylori overgrowth, about 12 weeks of high dose hydrochloric acid will wipe that out.
What do you think of people who take hydrochloric acid and get diarrhea immediately?
Well, there's a lot of different things that can be occurring to that. One could be a disruption. If they have an H. pylori overgrowth, they may be creating a die-off situation that's suboptimal. Second thing is it may be changing how they break down their food and, causing the person to get the runs or disrupting the microbiome if they have some disruption inside their intestinal tract. They're not remineralized. For example, if you don't have enough minerals in your system, that hydrochloric acid has to be remineralized before the food chyme goes into the intestinal tract. And if they don't, you get that burning sensation, and then you could be susceptible to, a duodenal ulcer or something like that, which you don't want to get.
So there could be a consideration there around stress and burn rate as well. If someone's very stressed and their mineral burn rate is high, that could be why they're having a reaction to HCl.
Oh, absolutely. Stress is such an interesting thing. You need an optimal amount of stress in order to
I
make
don't.
life interesting,
I don't. I'm fine.
but too much stress is very detrimental, especially for a medium amount of time. Well, you don't realize everybody has what we call stress is a stimulant of life. And what we the people are saying is, I'm getting more stimulus than my body can manage, and therefore I'm feeling stress.
Yeah.
So, but if you didn't have any stress, for example, if you didn't have gravity, well, you wouldn't have bones.
Mhm. Yeah.
Gravity is a stressor,
Yeah.
right? If you jump off a cliff, it's a little bit of excessive stressor. It's going to kill you, but it's just right if you want to keep your feet on the ground.
Yeah. It's
So
true.
it's all how you apply it,
It is,
right?
and our perceived stress is different from person to person. Although I'd
Yes,
probably rather no stress at this stage and kind of over it all now.
right.
Oh, Wade, I could talk to you for hours. Like I could keep going, but so far this has been awesome. I wanted to cover all things enzymes, and I think we did a good job there. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Um, So your company has been kind enough to offer a 10% discount to my clients. So thank you for that. Guys, I'll put that in the description. It's Model Health 10. Want to tell us where we can get your new book, where we can follow you guys and find out more?
Sure, you just go to BiOptimizers website or our social media or whatever. We have turned it into a education course. We have three certifications: ACE, NSAM, and AFA. So if people want to actually get certified on the course and get those designation for continuing course credits, it's a 500 page big heavy book. The Ultimate Nutrition Bible explains all the diets. We have the hierarchy of needs around diets. We deal with social, psychological, emotional, and spiritual needs that a lot of people don't consider in diets. We have a whole range. We get into epigenetics and how to look at that. And we try to make a most unbiased course so that people have a full range on that. Bioptimizers.com, you can get that. I have a free course called the Awesome Health course, which is just a step-by-step 84 days, 12 weeks of just walking you through all the different elements to look at your diet holistically. We don't even get into nutritional supplements to weigh down it. It's not about that. It's about what are the lifestyle practices. So it's all available at bioptimizers.com on our social media handles, bioptimizers. And we just want to be a good education force out there for people, provide options. All of our products have a 100% money back, 365 guarantee. So if you tried anything, didn't work for you, call us up, email us, text us. Real people answer the phone, talk to you, say no problem. We'll just get that charge taken back, and so you're not at risk with your money. We really respect people, and we want to be partners in your journey towards health and vitality. So thanks for having us on the podcast. It's
Yeah.
great. It's great, and the Irish spirit in Alberta is a good thing. And I wish you all the success in the world. And thank you for bringing us onto the podcast. It's really a
Yeah.
delight to
The
speak with you.
Fighting Irish.
Makes me want to take. Wants me. If I talk to you long enough, I'll have an Irish accent. My friend, she laughs at me because if I talk to her long enough, I start speaking with a slight Irish accent.
Yeah.
I did too much NLP study when I was a kid, I guess, so it happens. So I
Yeah.
find myself trying to hold back because I just want to go right down the rainbow thing, right into the leprechaun's gold.
Yeah. That's it. I say to my clients, you listen to my podcast enough and you'll all be walking around with an Irish twang. They say to me that their husbands will hear my voice from upstairs and say, "You're listening to Shemaine again."
That's awesome.
I told you at the start, there are some benefits to being Irish.
There you go.
I
Exactly.
didn't know you guys released a certification. I'm going to check into that.
Yeah, the official launch date is in 2 weeks, I think. So I don't know when this podcast comes out, or yeah, it's actually next week. So probably when this podcast lands, it'll be out.
This
So
podcast
the
will be
ultimate
out
nutrition
today.
course. Oh, it'll be out today. So we got a couple of days, but go to bioptimizers.com, get on our list, take the Awesome Health course for free, and then you'll hear some messages coming out for it. I think it's going to be awesome. Three certifications in one from highly accredited universities. It's continuing course credits. We've got video and audio quiz tests on it and everything so that you really understand the material. And of course, you get the big Bible plus a whole bunch of other bonuses. It's really a lovely course and really gives you a way to look at all of the noise out there and sort out what's right for you. So you don't have to read the whole thing. Maybe you're a keto person, maybe you're a carnivore, maybe you're somewhere in between. You know exactly what to do, and and particularly to identify those personal things that we don't think about. What is my emotional needs? What is my psychological needs? How do I like to socialize? How am I going to manage that long term? This is what makes strategies work over the long term. And we've had to figure all this stuff out. Matt and I come from very different backgrounds on how our diet philosophies, and we understand those uniquenesses is what makes us better equipped to identify them for other people without a bias. I don't care what diet people are on. I care for people to be healthy and vibrant and live their best life and support their family, their community, and the world. That's a good mission.
I've picked it up. You've said a few Irish things there. We're spending too much time together now. You mentioned one thing that I'm trying to get someone on the podcast. The spiritual aspect, I think, is so underrated when we're looking at health, and nobody's talking about it.
Dr. David Hawkins, who I was a big student of, we used to take groups down to see him. His first book was called Power versus Force, and he wrote a beautiful set of books, really getting into the esoterics of spirituality. He was a gem, that guy.
Mhm.
Anyways, one of his books was called Healing and Recovery. And as a medical doctor and a psychiatrist, he had the first um, attitudinal healing clinic in the United States dealing people with terminal illnesses. And they were using the Course in Miracles as part of their element. And the recovery factor of people who got past, I think it was somewhere in the mid 80s, of these terminal cases shot through the roof. People were recovering. And he didn't know what it was, but there was something that happened by the time they read that book or went through the workbook, that by somewhere in the 80s, their response to their negative responses to suboptimal stimulants and the positive responses in their body went up, their immune system markers up, their T cells went up. Like all of these immune boosting elements about having a set spiritual practice on a daily basis. That was a profound book, and he backed it up and he's research proven. Harvard has now confirmed many of those things later on. So it's definitely worth investigating. And I believe firmly that that connection, whatever it is for somebody, does have a profound impact on health and also the meaning of life. And I think if you know the meaning of life, it reduces the anxiety, and wherever you find meaning, you'll find life.
So, so, so important, I'll leave it at this. The few people I know that have no spiritual beliefs, whether or not it's God or anything, they're the sickest, unhappiest, miserable, negative people. So much so that I have to stay away from them because it breeds, and I just can't have that. Well, Wade, thank you for your time. Maybe we'll have you back on in a few months to discuss some other things. We'll see. Uh,
Anytime, love to, and really appreciate you continuing the message out there and helping everybody in your community, both locally and extend it through your podcast.
Thank you, and we'll chat soon. So thanks for your time today.
You bet.